I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
Welcome to this preview of Shrinking Trump.
On our show this week, we take a look at the 5th week of the Trump administration. We end up looking at weird things that Trump said that shows those signs of incipient dementia that we talked about in the spring. We saw him firing many people with his unelected co-conspirator, Elon Musk. But we also saw some resistance starting to form, which is giving some of us a bit of hope.
We also, speaking of hope, we also have an excellent guest, the abbot of Zen Mountain Monastery, Shugen, who is going to give us some pointers on how to cope psychologically with the dark times. Firing military officers for perceived disloyalty endangers the nation. Trump's removal of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and others might only be the beginning. And this is by Jack Reed, who is a U.S. representative from Rhode Island. Oh, no, sorry, in the Senate. Excuse me, he represents in the Senate. On Friday evening, the president dismissed Air Force General Charles Q. Brown, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as Admiral Lisa Franchetti, the chief of naval operations, and a number of other senior officers, and this is very important, including the judge advocates general for the Army, Navy, and Air Force for perceived political disloyalty. He is also reportedly considering dismissing additional officers who, quote, lack requisite leadership qualities. The implications for our national security cannot be overstated. A clear message is being sent to military leaders. Failure to demonstrate personal and political loyalty to Trump could result in retribution, even after decades of honorable service. In particular, firing the military's most senior legal advisors, this is very important, is an unprecedented and explicit move to install officers who will yield to the president's interpretation of the law with the expectation that they will be little more than yes men on the most consequential questions of military law. So remember, Harry, one of the things that we've been wondering about as well, would the military follow illegal orders if they were issued by Trump? And one of the things he said is, well, they're going to get rid of all the woke generals, so they'll have officers that will say, yes, sir, I'll shoot those protesters on Fifth Avenue. But they're because they know the ropes. They're getting rid of all of the safeguards. They're getting rid of the legal advisors, the career legal advisors, who are the ones who are the judges of what is legal for the military to do or not. So they would be the ones who step and say, "Excuse me, sir, but it's illegal. You're giving an illegal order." Well, if they got rid, like Shakespeare said, first kill all the lawyers, right? So if they get rid of all the lawyers, there won't be anyone to tell them that what they're doing is illegal.
Well, there's also been a plan that's been proposed by the the head of Blackwater, former Blackwater, who wants to put together a private police force to enforce ICE that would have the power of ICE officers, but would be privately run. So they're trying to do it in all kinds of ways, and then, of course, also with the FBI, I think too.
Right. Every dictator has a paramilitary. And so, of course, that had to be coming. And here's something that was said about these firings. Explicitly, Harry, they're admitting that they don't want any impediments to what they want to do. I just want to read this headline from Rolling Stone. Hegseth, quote, Trump will install new military attorneys who won't be, quote, roadblocks to anything.
Well, there's
a really scary phrase. Won't be roadblocks to anything.
Is Hegseth, the moron who says things out loud that he's not supposed to say. So welcome, Shugen. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, this is kind of a personal question, but we're psychologists here at Shrinking Trump, so we talk very personally. How has Buddhism, your practice, your community, your Dharma, helped you personally to cope with what's going on? Because we're all kind of dealing with the same thing, I'm imagining, and yet, what we want to learn from you, what you've learned about how to cope.
When Trump was first elected, I pondered for quite a while about how to address some of the things that I was seeing, because I didn't really want to take it up directly in a political sense,
right?
For various reasons. but I found it increasingly easy to just look at it from the point of view of morality, and how we treat each other and what kind of society we create, and personal values and qualities that are very important in Buddhism, and in a sense are indispensable in Buddhism. The Buddha really said that our moral being is an essential part of a path of liberation, that they can't be compartmentalized. And he spoke about that in a number of different ways. And so that's the way that I did and continue to sort of speak about this, rather than speaking about key issues, except in the way that they sort of show up in with regards to compassion or lack of.
Right, such as cutting off aid to the poorest countries, depriving them of medicine. It's an immoral act.
Yes, and I mean the Buddhism. The Buddha was he lived a long time. His teachings were very profound, and yet he said himself that his path was very simple in a sense. It was about the cause and the cessation of suffering. To deal with that distress, the Buddha said we have two basic impulses as human beings, as biological beings, that is pain and pleasure. And I think it's very interesting to see how the Buddha takes that very sort of primordial aspect of our being and sort of sees it in a very profoundly spiritual sense. That is because, in a sense, our aversion to pain, right, is in a sense an aversion to all that is life-destroying. And that our grasping at pleasure could be seen in a larger sense as wanting to move towards all that is life-affirming. And so we can see it as a sort of an impulse, a basic sort of biological impulse to avoid pain and to move towards pleasure, which also becomes how we get trapped, right? Because those two impulses become very habitual and cloudy with wrong view from a Buddhist perspective. But if we look at the underlying basis, it's sort of the basis of life, right? We're trying to stay alive and avoid what is antithetical to life, and we're trying to move towards all that is affirming to life. And in Buddha's sense, there's a sense that everyone ultimately wants the greatest, most highly elevated form of life, right? Which we speak of as enlightenment. And so the meditation is a very direct and, in a sense, simple practice. Doesn't mean it's easy. Of when we're meditating and things arise, observing those basic impulses. When something arises that we don't like, the various forms of aversion, to deny, to reject, to suppress, to avoid, to become numb, to go to sleep. And on the other hand, when we experience something we find pleasurable, whether it's good for us or not, we want to extend it. We want to preserve it, hold on to it, create a narrative around it. And so the meditation is really about trying to calm those two habitual impulses so that we can free ourselves of that, the sort of entanglement of that, and just experience things as they arise, free of our, in a sense, our opinion.
But it does it lead to a different kind of pleasure?
Yes, it does. The Buddha spoke about in the various stages of the meditative process that he spoke of. He talked about bliss. He often framed in different forms of very positive experience, and that as the meditation develops, those actually drop away because those themselves can become forms of attachment.
So that's just a preview of our show. Please don't just watch the preview. Watch the whole thing. You can find us on the Really American Network. You can search for us on YouTube under Shrinking Trump. You can also listen to an audio version of the podcast on Spotify and Apple Music and wherever you find your podcasts. But please listen to us, visit us. Our shows drop every Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. They're dropped as live streams, and then they're available for download after that. So we hope to see you soon.
See you there.